For 6 years, Nora Ashfield had made herself forgettable, and she had become very good at it. Welcome back to Steady Badges Stories. I'm glad you found your way here tonight. Before we begin, do me a favor. Tap the like button if stories like this one matter to you, subscribe if you haven't yet, and drop a comment telling me where in Canada you're listening from tonight. I read every single one. Now settle in, turn the light down low, this one earned it. Nora Ashfield was 39 years old, and she wore blue scrubs the color of a winter sky over Lake Ontario. She worked the evening shift at the Ridgewood Veterans Care Centre in Kingston, Ontario, a long-term facility that smelled of antiseptic and old wool blankets and the particular silence of men who had run out of words for what they had seen. She was quiet by design. She kept her dark hair pulled back tight. She did not wear jewelry. She did not raise her voice. When the doctors spoke over her in rounds, she let them. When the volunteers called her Han and handed her their empty coffee cups like she was furniture, she took the cups without comment and carried on. 6 years of that. 6 years of making herself small enough to disappear inside the work. Nobody at Ridgewood knew what she had been before. The night everything changed began with a fundraising gala in the center's main atrium. Crystal glassware on rented linen, a string quartet in the corner, 200 donors from Ottawa and Toronto who had come to feel good about a war none of them had ever fought. The event had been organized by Dr. Preston Beaumont, the center's new chief medical officer. He was 54, silver-haired, the kind of man who had his suits made somewhere with a French name. He had been at Ridgewood for 8 months, and in that time he had renovated the lobby, rebranded the newsletter, and referred to the nursing staff in board meetings as our support layer. Nora had been assigned to work the event, catering side. She carried a tray of sparkling water glasses across the polished floor, her eyes on the route, reading the room the way she could not stop reading rooms. 2 exits behind her, one beside the service corridor. The security guard by the far door had his radio clips left heel. Bad ankle, compensating. A man in a charcoal blazer near the window kept checking the door, waiting for someone, or watching for something. Old habits, they did not leave. She had stopped trying to make them. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Beaumont's voice rose from the podium, warm and shaped for rooms like this one. We talk a great deal about sacrifice in this country. We put it on cenotaphs. We pin it to lapels in November. But sacrifice, real sacrifice, isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. He paused. The room gave him the silence he was waiting for. Look at this woman right here. Nora went still. 200 faces turned toward her. She was standing at the edge of the catering table with a tray balanced on one forearm, and Dr. Beaumont was pointing at her across the room like she was a teaching aid he had prepared in advance. This is what service looks like in its purest form, he said. She'll never know what our veterans carried out there, she can't. But she shows up, every shift, quietly, without recognition, and there is something deeply beautiful in that kind of humility. A few people near the front applauded. One woman pressed a hand to her heart. Nora set the glass down. She did not look at the doctor. She looked at the floor, exactly the way she had trained herself to. And she carried the empty tray back toward the service corridor, while the room's borrowed goodwill washed over her like something she had already decided not to feel. In the kitchen, Renata, the night charge nurse, 12 years at Ridgewood, built like a woman who had raised 4 children through hard winters, was leaning against the counter with her arms folded. I saw that, Renata said. It's nothing. He pointed at you in front of 200 people like you were a show pony. It's fine, Renata. You keep saying that. Renata studied her with the attention of someone who had been watching a mystery for a long time and was still no closer to solving it. One of these days I'm going to figure you out, Ashfield. Nora almost smiled. You've been saying that for 6 years. I'm patient. She pushed through the next set of doors into the long corridor of Ward B where the noise of the gala fell away completely. This was where she actually worked, long-term care. The men the war had used and then set down. Korea, peacekeeping Afghanistan, old hands on thin blankets, machines breathing slow and steady in the dark. Bed 4 was awake, she had known he would be. They using you again out there, said the man in bed 4. His name was Earl Gagnon. He was 77, a former warrant officer with the Royal Canadian Regiment, 2 tours in Bosnia and 1 in Kandahar. His hip had given out 2 years ago and his heart was working harder than it should. He had a white mustache and dark eyes sharp as pins, and he reminded Nora of someone she did not let herself think about directly. The way you don't look straight at a bright light. Little bit, she said. That new doctor talks like a man selling real estate. Earl's voice was sandpaper over old wood, all that smooth and nothing underneath. Nora checked his oxygen line, adjusted the pillow. Her hands moved with a sureness that had nothing to do with 6 years at a care center and everything to do with somewhere else. He's not wrong about everything, she said. He's wrong about you. Earl caught her wrist. His grip was weaker than it used to be, but his eyes were not. "I've been watching you for 3 years, Ashfield. I've been around enough soldiers to know one when she's trying hard not to be. There's a difference between a person who's modest and a person who's hiding." He held her gaze. "You're hiding." Nora went very still. For just a moment something shifted behind her eyes, something old and load-bearing that rarely showed itself. Earl saw it. He nodded once, the way a man nods when a long suspicion settles into certainty. "Get some rest, Earl," she said softly. "You watch tonight," he said, letting go of her wrist. "The air feels wrong, been feeling wrong all day. I learned in Bosnia to trust that. What do you think is coming?" But his eyes were already closing, and he only shook his head against the pillow. "Something that's been on its way for a while," he murmured. She stood in the doorway a moment longer than she needed to, then tucked the blanket a little higher, the way you tuck in someone you've decided to care about against your own better judgment. "Good night, soldier," she said without thinking. And Earl, half asleep, said good night. She stopped, that word. She had not said it to anyone in this building, not once. She did not correct herself, she just walked on. At 9:47, the ambulance bay doors at the far end of the corridor slammed open like a starting pistol. Not the slow roll of a scheduled transfer, a crash, boots on tile. A voice she could hear from 40 feet away, controlled and urgent, the shorthand of someone trained to make noise, do exactly one thing and nothing more. "Hot patient, penetrating trauma. I need a nurse, I need her now. Ashfield. Is there an Ashfield here?" Nora set down the chart she was holding, the way you set down something when your whole nervous system has gone very quiet and very awake at the same time. Nobody at Ridgewood used her surname like that. Not as a summons, not as a last coordinate. She came around the corner and saw the gurney. 2 paramedics, both working hard, both at the edge of what they knew how to do. On the gurney, a large man in clothes that had been civilian clothes about 4 hours ago, before the blood. His left hand was clamped against his thigh, 3 fingers driving into the tissue, with the deliberateness of someone who had been taught exactly what he was doing and why. His other hand lay open and loose at his side. His face was gray and damp and almost peaceful, the expression of a man who has decided to conserve everything that is left. Civilians in shock thrash, they grab at people, they beg. This man was lying completely still, burning nothing. He was an operator, she would have bet her life. She already had once on men like him. "Nurse Ashfield," the lead paramedic said, voice cracking as the gurney's brakes locked in front of her. "We got nobody. The on-call went to cover the gala, the duty doctor is 40 minutes out. We don't have a surgeon and this man's been losing blood since the Queensway. Femoral or close to it. We cannot get a tourniquet on it. Too high, too close, pressure isn't holding." Nora's eyes moved across him, fast and methodical, the way she had once run the same scan in places with no roofs. Gray skin, lips pulling at the edges. The dark soak at his hip pulsing, not seeping. Pulsing, which meant artery, which meant the clock was already running. Breathing fast and shallow with a catch on the right side. A small tug at his collarbone with each inhale. Neck veins distended, trachea shifted, just barely left. A tension pneumothorax building on the right. She had watched that kill a man on a hillside in the dark once, while she screamed for something sharp that never came. She had promised herself, kneeling in that gravel with her hands full of nothing, that it would not beat her again. 2 ways to die, racing each other. She knew exactly what to do for both. That was the whole problem. A regular nurse did not know how to pin a junctional bleed against the pelvic shelf with her bare hand. A regular nurse did not read a tension pneumothorax from across a hallway by the pull of a collarbone. A regular nurse did not carry the deep muscle memory of the exact intercostal space, the exact angle, the exact pressure needed to decompress a dying chest with a needle in the dark, on a moving vehicle, in a country she was not allowed to name. If she stepped forward, the 6 years were over. Every wall she had built, gone, in front of 200 witnesses and their phones. She looked at the man's face. He was looking back at her, pale, fading, the edges of his eyes going soft, but the focus in them locked on her like a hook, refusing to let go. "Ashfield," he said, the word cost him something. "Nora, it's you." The lead paramedic blinked at her. "You know this man?" "Common surname," Nora said, flat, careful. The man shook his head once, slow and certain. He drew a breath that bubbled faintly. "Your father, he sent me. Brigadier General Ashfield. He found me before a wet cough swallowed the rest of the sentence and left blood at the corner of his mouth." The corridor tilted. Her father, David Ashfield, 32 years with the Canadian Forces, retired brigadier general. The man who had taught her to shoot before she was tall enough to see over a kitchen counter. Who had taught her to breathe slow under pressure the way you breathe when you've decided to outlast whatever is trying to kill you. The man whose name she had not said out loud in 6 years because saying it cracked something she could not afford to crack and still keep functioning. He sent me, which meant her father had known this was coming, which meant somewhere out there, across the silence she had built between them. He had reached through it one last time, through a dying stranger on a gurney, before. She did not finish that thought. There was no time for it. For one heartbeat, the corridor fell away. She was 8 years old on a dock in Petawawa, her father kneeling beside her, patient and enormous, one hand on her shoulder. Fear is just weather, Nora. You wait it out, then you do the work. She had done the work for 14 years after that, in rooms with no windows in countries she could not mark on a map. Then one night in a valley outside Kandahar, a mission she had planned went wrong in the way. Missions only go wrong when someone outside the room knows what's inside it. 4 people who trusted her had not come home. She had walked out of the debrief and kept walking, and she had not stopped until she was invisible. But invisible was not the same as gone. The dying man's hand moved, searching the air, and Nora caught it. She felt the calluses there, the trigger hand, the rope hand, the hand of someone who had spent years doing the same unremarkable and violent and necessary work she had. Her father's man, sent by her father, bleeding out on her floor. Behind her, Dr. Beaumont had pushed through from the gala, drawn by the commotion. He stood at the corridor entrance in his tailored jacket, taking in the scene with the expression of a man recalculating his evening. "All right," he said, moving toward the gurney with his hands slightly raised, performing calm for the donors crowding the hallway behind him. "Let's all take a breath here. I'll make the calls. Somebody contact emergency services." He put a firm hand on Nora's shoulder. "Step back, please. Let me through. You're in the way." She did not move. The monitor screamed. The numbers fell off a cliff. "He's going to arrest," the paramedic said, his voice stripped down to its foundation. "Right here, I have nothing left." Earl Gagnon's voice rose up from somewhere in her memory. "There's a difference between modest and hiding. You're hiding, Ashfield." The man on the gurney was still looking at her, all the way to the last of his strength, and the message in his eyes was the one it always is when a soldier in extremis finally finds the person they've been looking for. "You're it, there's no one else, it has to be you." 3 seconds. She stood in those 3 seconds longer than she had ever stood anywhere. Then something in her that had been folded away for 6 years quietly stood up to its full height. Nora's spine straightened, her shoulders dropped and squared, the tremor in her hands, she hadn't even noticed it until it was simply no longer there. When she spoke, her voice did not rise, it did not need to. It carried the way a voice carries only when it has given orders under fire and been obeyed. The corridor went completely silent. Dr. Beaumont's hand slid off her shoulder. "You," she pointed at the first paramedic, 2 fingers, no wasted motion. 14-gauge angiocath, largest needle in your kit in my hand now. She turned you, 2 large-bore IVs, both lines wide open, pressure bags if you have them now. She looked past him, Renata, trauma kit from the crash cart. Combat gauze or regular gauze, whatever this building has, and I need this corridor clear of anyone not doing a job. Move." Nobody moved, they stared. I said now. The corridor came apart and ran toward her. The paramedic slapped the needle into her palm without thinking. Renata ran. The gala crowd pressed back against the walls. Somewhere in the mass of evening gowns and blazers, a phone lowered, then another, as the people who had come to applaud a speech about sacrifice began to understand they were watching something that had no relationship to any speech they had ever heard. Nora dropped to her knees in the spreading blood. She drove 3 fingers into the wound at the crease of his hip, found the femoral artery against the hard shelf of his pelvic bone, and pressed it flat. Nothing else would stop this bleeding now. No tourniquet could reach here, no clamp, only a hand that knew exactly where to push and exactly how hard, willing to cause enough pain to buy a life. The flood slowed, nearly stopped. The man arched and groaned through clenched teeth. Good, pain meant a brain still receiving blood. "Hold exactly where my hands are." She guided the paramedic's larger hands over hers and locked them into position. "Don't lift, don't shift, don't move out of curiosity. You are this man's blood pressure. Do you understand me?" "Yes," the paramedic breathed. "Yes, ma'am." The operator's eyes found her, dimming but holding. "Stay with me," Nora said, her voice softening for him only. "You came a long way. You don't quit at the door. Look at my face. Breathe when I tell you." She turned her hands to his chest, running them down his ribs, reading by touch the way she read everything after dark. By feel, by repetition, by 10,000 drills in rooms that no longer existed. The right side was tight. The trachea had shifted further left than it had 30 seconds ago. The veins in his neck stood out like cords. The trapped air was doing exactly what it always did, quietly and efficiently squeezing his heart one breath at a time. "Needle," she said, and held up her right hand without looking. Renata pressed the angiocath into her palm. "You cannot use that." Dr. Beaumont's voice was thin now, the studio polish gone from it. "She's a nurse. She does not have the authority. Somebody stop her. She will kill him." Nora did not acknowledge that he existed. She walked her fingers up the ribs and found the spot. second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. She had found it in daylight and pitch darkness, in the back of helicopters, in the mud of a ditch, on men whose names sat on a memorial wall in Ottawa she had never been able to bring herself to visit. She uncapped the needle with her teeth, set it against the skin just above the third rib, and drove it in with one smooth, controlled push. The hiss was immediate, sharp and long and unmistakable, trapped air rushing out of the chest cavity, the pressure releasing all at once. The man's right chest fell. His next breath came in deeper than the last, then deeper still. The blue at his lips faded toward gray, then toward something approaching color. On the monitor, the numbers caught, held, began finally to climb. The corridor was absolutely silent. 200 people in evening clothes, 2 paramedics, 1 charge nurse, a chief medical officer who had built a career on explaining courage to rooms exactly like this one. Every one of them frozen, watching a woman in blue scrubs pull a man back from the edge of death with a needle and her bare hands. "Combat gauze," Nora said. Renata pressed it into her grip. Nora packed the wound tight, driving the treated gauze hard against the artery, her thumbs sealing the pressure, her lips moving in a count that lived so deep in her she did not have to think about it. "Mark the time," she said. "Write it on his forearm if you have to. This bleed is controlled, not closed. He needs a vascular surgeon within the hour or he loses the leg. Call KHSC now. Not in 5 minutes now. Tell them junctional hemorrhage controlled in the field. Tension pneumothorax decompressed, patient stabilizing but critical. Have vascular and thoracic standing by on the pad." The lead paramedic stared at her over their locked hands. "Who are you? Nurses don't. Who are you?" Nora didn't answer him. The man on the gurney's hand found her wrist. His grip had almost nothing left in it, but it found her. "He asked me," the operator whispered, each word burning what he had left, "to tell you he was proud of you. The whole time, every year you were gone. Every year you didn't answer the phone. He never stopped." He took a breath that cost him. The last thing he said before. His voice gave out for a moment. It was your name, just your name, over and over. Something cracked behind Nora's sternum, deep and quiet, in the place where she kept things she could not afford to feel on a regular shift. She had not gone to her father's service. She had told herself it was because she could not risk being found, that the people looking for the woman she used to be would be watching the church, watching the grave. All of that was true. It was also a coward's comfort. The simpler truth, the one she had never spoken. She had not been able to stand and watch them fold the flag over the man who had made her. So she had let him go into the ground without his daughter beside him. He had been proud of her anyway, through all of it. She held that. She had learned to hold things. A few more minutes would not break her. "Helicopter's 12 minutes out," Renata said, phone pressed to her ear. "Kingston General wants a name for the field report." The whole hallway waited. Dr. Beaumont straightened his jacket. He had built an entire career on knowing the right thing to say in difficult rooms. He reached for it now. "Well," he said with a small recovering laugh, "lucky for this young man, we had a nurse with some emergency training on hand tonight. Let's give a hand to our wonderful care team, folks. This is exactly the dedication that—" "Sit down." Nora said it quietly. She did not turn her head, she did not raise her voice, but the 2 words landed like a door slamming in an empty building, and Dr. Preston Beaumont stepped back and sat into a chair he had not been standing near, and he did not speak again. A man near the middle of the crowd stepped forward, older, silver-haired, a small bronze pin on his lapel, the kind worn by men who had been somewhere and come back different. He had been watching her since the moment she dropped to her knees. "Ma'am," he said quietly at first, then louder, turning so the whole frozen room could hear him. "I served 24 years with the PKLI. I retired a chief warrant officer. I know what I just watched happen on this floor." He held her gaze. That was a manual junctional compression and a needle decompression of a tension pneumothorax, done clean in under 90 seconds with no surgical backup, no hesitation, no kit beyond what was in a paramedic bag. His voice roughened. "I have seen that done exactly twice in my career, both times by the same kind of person. It was never a nurse." The corridor was completely still. "My daughter served 2 tours," he said. "She came home because someone who could do what you just did found her in a ditch outside Kandahar. I never knew who. I spent years not knowing." He stopped then. "So whatever you are, ma'am, whatever you were, someone in this room owes you something they'll never be able to pay back. I know that much." The question filled the corridor. Nora rose from her knees. She let the paramedic take the pressure from her hands, talking him through the handoff in 2 quiet words. She wiped her hands on the towel Renata held out. She did not curl her shoulders inward. Her chin stayed level. Her eyes came off the floor for the first time all evening, and they did not go back down. She looked at the man on the gurney, alive because of her hands. She looked at the warrant officer who already knew the answer. Last, she looked at Dr. Beaumont, sitting very still and very small in his folding chair. the salesman of other people's sacrifice with nothing left to sell tonight. My name, she said, and her voice filled the room the way it once had filled rooms with no walls, is Nora Ashfield. The far doors at the end of the corridor opened. 3 people came through, moving the way only certain kinds of people move in a crowd, scanning corners before they looked at faces, hands visible, deliberate. Plain dark clothes, no logos. The woman in front was maybe 50, silver threading through her short hair, a scar along her jaw that hadn't been there 14 years ago. She stopped when she saw Nora. Ghost, she said, the old call sign, the one Nora had not heard in 6 years. Nora said, Price. Colonel Diane Price, retired, Joint Task Force 2, the finest intelligence analyst Nora had ever served beside and the only person outside her father who had known where she went when she disappeared. Older now, harder, but the eyes were identical. How did you find me? Nora said. It wasn't a question. We didn't. Price glanced at the man on the gurney. Webb found you, we found Webb. She stepped closer. He came to you first, Nora, before he came to us. Because your father asked him to at the end, she let that settle. 2 weeks ago, in his sleep, he wasn't in any pain. 2 weeks. He'd been gone 2 weeks and she hadn't known. She'd been carrying water trays across a lobby floor while her father lay 2 weeks in the ground. Nora's jaw set hard. She kept her eyes dry. A few more minutes. Webb was carrying something, Price said. A file, account records, intercept transcripts, the full chain of evidence connecting a private security contractor named Gregor Halst to the sale of your team's route in 2019. Your 4 people didn't die because of bad intelligence, Nora. They died because Halst sold the route for a wire transfer and buried it deep enough that you spent 6 years believing it was your fault. The name landed like a stone dropped into still water. Gregor Halst. A man she had met once briefly at a briefing in Trenton. She had thought nothing of him. Webb spent 3 years getting the proof, Price said. He was bringing it in tonight when Halst's people caught up with him on the 401. Put 2 rounds in him. He kept driving. 90 kilometers, bleeding out, past 4 hospitals, straight to this building. Because a dying brigadier general told him his daughter was the only person left who would know what to do with it. Renata had gone white to the lips. The helicopter's 8 minutes out, she said. They want to take him to. No, Price said flatly. Nora understood before Price finished the thought. The shape of the whole night turning over. Halst's people are still outside, Nora said. Price nodded. 6, maybe 7, former operators, very good, and they know Webb came here. They tracked the blood trail from the highway. She paused. They won't leave witnesses, Nora. That's the job. That's always been the job. The corridor seemed to contract. Nora looked past Price down the long hall toward Ward B. The men in their beds, Earl Gagnon in bed 4, certain something had been coming up the road all day. He'd been right. He was always right about the air. That was the moment Dr. Beaumont stood up. All right, that is entirely enough. He adjusted his jacket, reaching for the authority he had worn all evening. I don't know who these people are, but this is a licensed care facility, and I am the senior administrator present, and I am calling the RCMP immediately. Everyone calm down. We handle this properly. The proper way gets the people in those beds killed, Nora said, quiet, not even looking at him. Beaumont, listen to me carefully. In a few minutes, armed men are going to come through those doors. The police are 25 minutes out on a good night. We do not have 25 minutes. She turned and looked at him fully for the first time. You spent this evening telling a room full of people what sacrifice looks like. I need you to be very quiet now so I can do it. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time in his long, polished career, the salesman of courage was standing face to face with the real thing, and it did not look anything like his speeches. Nora was already moving. Renata, the charge nurse straightened. 200 people in that atrium. I need them out the south exit, fast, no panic. Walk in front, don't run. The second one person runs, you have a stampede and people die in the doorway. Move with purpose and keep them moving. Take Beaumont. Put something in his hands. Keep him occupied. The ward, Renata said, her voice cracking. Earl, the men in the beds, they can't walk. The ward stays with me. Price's hand settled on her shoulder. Ghost. It's 4 of us against 6 or 7, and one of mine is bleeding on a gurney. We can draw them off. Lead them into the parking structure. Open ground. Nora shook her head. They came for Webb and the file. Men like Halst burn the building to make sure. They won't check the beds first. Leading them off does nothing for the people who can't follow. She met Price's eyes steady as stone. We hold the ward. Price searched her face for a long moment, and something in her expression settled, the look of a person setting down something they'd carried a very long way. There she is, she said quietly. I knew she was still in there. She turned to the 2 people behind her. Chen Reeves, you heard the officer. Her ground, her plan. We follow her lead. Nora was already crouching by the gurney, taking Marcus Webb's hand one more time. His eyes opened, found her face, held on. You did it, she told him, low and certain. You found me, your job is done, Senior Sergeant. Rest now, I've got the watch. The file, Webb breathed, inside my jacket, left panel. Don't let them bury it again. She reached inside his torn jacket and found the edge of it, a waterproof document sleeve stitched into the lining, the kind a man sews in himself when he knows he might not live long enough to hand it over by hand. She gripped it the way you grip something your father sent to you across 6 years of silence. Then the lights went out. The entire wing dropped into darkness all at once. The monitors died mid-beep. The exit signs guttered down to a dim arterial red. Outside, the backup generator coughed twice and gave up entirely. In the new black, Price's voice came calm and flat. That's them, they cut the mains, they're already on site. Darkness is a weapon, most people never understand that. They think the dark hides them equally. It does not. It devours whoever panics first, belongs entirely to whoever stays calmest inside it. Nora Ashfield was the calmest thing in the building. Nobody move, she said into the black, not loud, not needing to be. Let your eyes adjust. They cut the power to scatter us. We are not going to give them that. Breathe slow. Around her, the red of the emergency exits began to bleed shape back into the world. The gurney, the crash cart, the long throat of the corridor running toward Ward B, and the men who could not save themselves. They'll split, Nora said. 2 entry points. The ambulance bay, because that's how Webb came in and they tracked the blood to the door. And the North Service stairwell. Dark, quiet, a direct run at the ward. 4 and 4, standard doctrine. Agreed, Price said. Price, take Chen, hold the ambulance bay. 1 wide door, funnel point. 2 people with patients can hold a hallway against 4 all night if they keep their angles. Reeves, you're with me on the stairwell. She paused. Webb goes somewhere they can't reach him, so does the file. She pushed the gurney fast and silent on its wheels, deep into the black mouth of Ward B, parking him between 2 heavy steel supply carts, tucked back from any sightline to the door. She pressed the waterproof sleeve into Earl Gagnon's hands and folded his fingers around it. In the red emergency light, his eyes glittered like wet flint. I told you, Earl said. Air's been wrong all day. You told me. Nora held his gaze. I need one last thing from you, Earl. Soldier to soldier. Hold this. Whatever you hear through that door, you do not let it go, and you do not let anyone touch it but me. Can you hold that line? Earl's grip tightened on the sleeve with a strength that surprised her. I held a crossroads in Srebrenica for 11 hours with 3 men and a radio that didn't work, he said. I think I can manage this. Go on, then. Go do the thing you came back here to do. She nearly came apart right there. The clock wouldn't allow it. Heads down, she told the whole ward. Every old man in every bed, men who had once been young men in places with names that never made the papers. Stay low, we have you. Nobody comes through that door tonight. Then she turned and walked toward the dark. A hospital, to someone who knows how to look at it, is full of things that are not what they appear to be. Nora moved down the north corridor and placed each one where her hands would find it. A fire extinguisher lifted cold and heavy from its bracket. A crash cart's defibrillator clipped to her hip. A full oxygen cylinder wheeled into the shadow of an alcove. A length of steel suction tubing folded into easy reach. Prepare the ground, Nora. The fight is half won before the enemy arrives. Reeves watched her work in the red dark without saying a word. He had heard things about Ashfield. Ghost, the medic who moved like weather. Watching her now, he understood the call sign. The north stairwell door opened at 2211. 4 shapes flowed through it, low and smooth, fanning wide. The deliberate spread of well-trained people who had done exactly this in dark buildings on 3 continents. Night vision down. Weapons high, patient and very confident. They had never done it on Nora Ashfield's ground. She let the lead person pass the mouth of the alcove. The oxygen cylinder came around in a short, controlled arc. The lead figure folded and did not rise. Before the second could orient, the fire extinguisher bloomed a wall of white fog down the corridor, swallowing the emergency light, blinding the night vision entirely, and turning what had been their greatest advantage into a blank gray curtain they could not see through. Pull the goggles. Fog, I'm blind. Reeves took the second one from the flank, clean and quick and quiet. Nora took the third with the defibrillator paddles. A charge built to restart a stopped heart, used here to put a strong person on the floor without stopping theirs for good. She was not trying to kill these people. She was trying to stop them. There is a difference, and only the most disciplined people alive ever learn to hold that line under pressure. The fourth was the smart one. They gave ground fast, found the wall, and swung their weapon toward the ward door, toward the beds, toward Earl. Nora was faster. She had always been faster. She came through the white fog and was inside the weapon's reach before the trigger could move, and she did what her father had drilled into her 10,000 times on a mat in a gymnasium in Petawawa before she was tall enough to see over the counter. The wrist, the weight, the floor. The weapon spun away into the fog. The person stayed down. In the red dark, the old soldiers in their beds had watched the whole thing without making a sound. They knew combat when it walked back into a room. Earl Gagnon watched the woman move through the white, held the file to his chest, and thought, not for the first time in 3 years, that he had been right about her from the beginning. Nora keyed the radio. Price had pressed into her hand. North stairwell secure, 4 down, none critical, restrained, report your status. Price's voice came back, measured and tight, bay holding, 3 down. But, Ghost, Halst is not in the assault. He sent the team through the doors and stayed back. That's not him. He always leads. Nora's blood went cold. Halst had not come for Webb through the front. He had come for the file, and the file was in the hands of a 77-year-old man with a failing heart in an unguarded ward, because she had sent everyone else to the entry points. She was already running before the thought finished forming. She came back through the white fog past the people she had put down, silent on the wet tile. The whole world narrowed to a single corridor and the ward door at the end of it. There was a man standing beside Earl's bed. He had come through the ceiling, the old maintenance crawl space above Ward B, the one route she had not sealed, because no one who wasn't a ghost would have known it existed. Large and unhurried, a pistol in one hand, the other open and patient. The file, Gregor Halst was saying, soft and reasonable. Give it up, old man, and you go right back to sleep. Simple deal. Earl Gagnon looked up at the man with the gun, 77 years old, 2 tours. Lungs giving out one slow breath at a time. He pulled the waterproof sleeve tighter against his chest over his slow and stubborn old heart. Son, Earl said, with the full composure of a man who has been more afraid and in worse company, I have been dying since February. You're going to need to do considerably better than a gun. Halst sighed and raised the pistol. Halst. He turned. Nora stood in the doorway, the white fog curled around her ankles, blood-dried brown on her hands. Her father's steadiness sat plain in her eyes, not calm because nothing was happening, but calm because the person behind it had already decided what happened next. And Gregor Halst, for the first time in a long career of making decisions in dark rooms, looked at someone and felt afraid. The ghost herself, he said slowly. Word was you quit, disappeared, went off-grid after the valley. I did, Nora said, taking one slow step into the ward. You're why? His gun hand had drifted, not by much, but she saw it, she saw everything. Easy, he said. You're a nurse now. We're both being smart. I take the file, I go back up through the ceiling. Nobody else in this room gets hurt. You step aside. That's the whole deal. Put the weapon down, Gregor. You know I can't. Then you already know where this ends. A long moment, the ward utterly still. The old soldiers in their beds, not moving, not making a sound, holding the perimeter the only way left to them. Halst swung the pistol off Nora and onto Earl. That was the mistake. She crossed the room before the barrel finished moving. What happened in the next 4 seconds would be talked about in that ward for years, though nobody who witnessed it could ever quite describe it start to finish. Inside the weapon she went, the way her father had taught her, the way muscle memory 14 years deep does not forget even after 6 years of carrying water trays. The wrist turned. The single shot went into the ceiling and rained plaster over the beds. The floor, the bed frame, the geometry of 2 bodies in a small space, all of it turned against Halst in one unbroken motion. Then Gregor Halst was face down on the linoleum of a veterans' care ward in Kingston, Ontario, his weapon spinning away across the tile, his arm locked in a hold he had no path out of. 14 years, Nora said very quietly, leaning her weight into the lock. I did this work for this country. You sold 4 people for a wire transfer. 4 people who trusted the system that trusted you. I carried their deaths for 6 years, Gregor. Then finish it, he spat against the floor. You want to, I can feel it. Nora was silent for a long moment. Then she eased the pressure, not to free him, but to make a choice in front of witnesses. No, she said, that's who you are, not me. She bound his hands with the cord from the window blinds, the knot of someone who had done it many times in worse light, and stood up. You're going to live, she said. You're going to stand in a courtroom under bright lights, and every name in that file is going to stand up there beside you. That's not mercy, it's worse. You're going to watch everything you built come apart in daylight, where the whole country gets to see exactly what you were. The ward doors opened. Price came through first, then Chen and Reeves, and behind them the first red and blue wash of police lights came down the corridor. 23 minutes, exactly as she had calculated. The cavalry arriving to an already decided battlefield. Price took one look at Halst on the floor, bound and still, and let out a single long breath. You held the ward, she said. I held the ward, Nora answered. Earl Gagnon held the file up in one trembling hand. I believe this belongs to the government of Canada, he announced to the room with the full dignity of a man who had just won the last firefight of his long life. Held the perimeter. Lost nobody, you can put that in the report. Nora crossed to his bed. She took the file. Then she took his thin hand, and for the first time in 6 years, in front of everyone left standing in that room, she let her eyes fill. "Outstanding work, soldier," she whispered. "Knew you had it in you," Earl said, his voice gone soft and quiet. "I told you there was a difference between humble and hiding. Don't you go back underground, girl. A thing as good as you doesn't belong buried. Promise an old man." "I promise," she said, and she meant every syllable. By the time the sun came through the windows of Ward B, it was over. Marcus Webb was in surgery at Kingston Health Sciences, stable, expected to keep the leg. The round had been removed, the trapped air drained, all of it because a nurse on a forgotten ward had known exactly what to do. Halst and the 6 people who came with him were in federal custody. The file had passed to people who would spend 2 years dismantling everything Gregor Halst had built on the lives of better people. Dr. Preston Beaumont stood alone in the emptied atrium in his fine jacket as the first real light came through the tall windows, holding nothing, watching it all. Nora found him there. He could not meet her eyes, the man who had pointed at her in front of 200 people and called her the simple kind of sacrifice. "I owe you an apology," he said, the words coming out small. "I had no idea who you, what you." "No," Nora said, "you didn't." He let out a thin, hollow breath. "All those speeches, all those galas. I've never done a single thing like what I watched you do tonight." She looked at him for a moment. She could have ended him with one sentence, and every person who heard the story would have cheered her for it. She chose differently. "Then stop selling it," she said, not cruel, almost kind. "Go find out what it actually costs a person. Then maybe one day you'll have earned the right to talk about it." She left him in the light and did not look back. Price was waiting by the exit doors, wearing the look Nora remembered from a dozen briefings, the one that arrived just before an offer. "You know where this goes," Price said. "We need you back, Nora, the real you. I can have the reinstatement paperwork started before noon. New assignment, new ground, new name if you want one. Your father's daughter, back in the field, finishing what he started. Just say the word." 6 years ago, those words would have been everything. Nora looked down the long corridor toward Ward B, where the morning light was going gold through the windows, where old soldiers were waking up who would not have woken at all if she had stepped back instead of stepping forward. She understood now what Earl had been trying to tell her. The real difference, not between humble and hiding, but between the 2 lives she had been living wrong. "No," she said. Price blinked. "Then what does Nora Ashfield do now?" She looked toward the ward, and for the first time in longer than she could find the beginning of, a real smile came to her face and stayed. "This building is full of people who came home from the same places they sent us," she said. "Nobody here knows how to reach them. Nobody speaks the language. Nobody knows what a man's eyes do 3 years after a thing he can never say out loud." She held up the 2 hands that had pulled a life back from the edge a few hours before. "I do. So I'm staying. I'm going to build something real here. Tactical trauma training. Real care for what actually comes home with them. Run by someone who has stood exactly where they're standing." Price nodded, slow and deep, the way one soldier honors another without lifting a hand. "Your father would be proud of you," she said. "He already was," Nora answered. "Someone made sure I knew." 4 months later, a new wing opened at the Ridgewood Veterans Care Center. They had wanted to name it after a senator, or a corporate sponsor, or anyone with a recognizable face and a checkbook. Nora told them no. She named it the Gagnon Center, after an old warrant officer who had held a perimeter on the worst night in the building's history and never once let go of the thing in his hands, and who had lived just long enough to see his name go up above the door before his tired heart finally peacefully laid him down. On the morning it opened, a young veteran came through the door shaking, unable to put a single word to what was wrong with him, certain no living person could understand. A nurse with dark hair pulled back and clear gray eyes and 3 old scars she didn't talk about sat down in the chair beside him. She did not look at the floor, there was no curl in her shoulders. She looked at him straight on, direct and unhurried, and she said the only words that have ever actually reached a person carrying that much weight. "I know," she said. "I've been there too, let's get you home." Respect is not a title that gets handed to you. It is not a speech or a podium or a name on a donor wall. It is what you do when no one expects anything of you, on the night it costs you everything to be seen. Nora Ashfield spent half her life learning the hardest truth there is. The bravest thing a person can do is not to hide what they are. It is to stand up, all the way up in the open light, and let the world finally see it.